Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Laws of 1975, this meeting is duly advertised in the South Jersey Times and the Sentinel. The municipal clerk of the township has been duly notified, and the requirements of posting of notice have been met. If you would, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Church, we call roll.
Caselli? Here. Cunningham? Here. DeSilvio?
Here.
Fregoso?
Here.
Johnson Collins? Here. Dean? Not here. Metzger? Not here. Trace? Not here. Grant?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. First item on our agenda this evening is the end of year student performance report put on by Mrs. Dolan and Mr. Sleep.
That's why you two came tonight, wasn't it?
Exactly. We're watching you.
You were watching me. All right, good evening, yes?
Real quick, before we start, I think this is Zach's first time in front of the board. So
It was, I was just getting ready to introduce him, but you go ahead.
He told me that he didn't be able to introduce Zach, so this is Zach Slavin took over for Dr. Carr. He's our instructional supervisor, and we're certainly happy to have him here this evening.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you. I love it.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
He's going to be jumping in too during the presentation, and he has a section as well. So what I'm going to do is give you an overview of how the student performance ended for this school year. So we're going to talk about Iready Reading, Iready Math, Dibbles information, and math interview, which we do K to 4, and then math reasoning inventory, which we do at the end of 4th grade, 5th, and 6th grade as well. So for Iready Reading for 2021, this is an overall picture of how the district performed. Window 1 is the fall, and window 3 is the spring. So you can see, and what I like too about this graph is it'll tell you how many kids were there in the fall and then how many kids were there in the spring. So just looking at, you can come on in. Just looking at the kids that were mid or above grade level, at the beginning of the year it was 219, and we ended the year with 433 students at that level. For early on grade level, we were at 227 and we ended the year at 247. So you can see that the green obviously got bigger, the yellow got smaller, and the red got smaller as well. I know it's a little hard to see. Alicia, are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, do those include the assessments that students did at home, like for remote? Those
Yes.
that also do at home?
So it includes everybody. Everybody that took a fall and everybody that took a winter.
Which isn't bad for what would happen last year.
No, and we did see some negative growth from fall to spring, and when you look back at the individual students, some of them took the assessment, they were remote in the fall, and then they were in person in the spring. So there was a little bit of that, and just making sure that we dig deeper into the individual data so we can get more of an accurate picture for individual students. So we'll see what this compares to, because the last time we have is 18-19 data for fall to end of year. We'll see what this looks like next year when we're going to be comparing it and hopefully have a normal school year when we're in person 5 days a week all year long, and see what that looks like. So this is kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. Kindergarten rocked it. 61% and 30% of the students were early on or above grade level. And so we've had a lot of conversation about that. Like, how many of those kids were remote? How many of those kids were in person? What does that look like? When we compare it to years past, it's pretty spot on to where our kindergartners are at the end of the school year. But we also took a look at the class sizes of each of those kindergarten classes to see if that impacted their ability to perform at a higher level as well. Grade 1, looking at the 44% and the 18% of the kids that were early on and above grade level at the end of the school year. And grade 2, 45 and 20. So at each grade level, the kids were making growth. The kids were learning. For 3rd grade, this is reading at the top. 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, you'll see a little bit of that red start to creep in there when we hit the 5th and 6th grade. We've been having a lot of conversations at Ritter about Iready. It's new for them still. We've had it at Janvier and Ritter for like 5 years, and it's brand new over at Ritter. So still learning the system, learning how the data speaks to other pieces of data that we have and how those students are going to perform overall. So taking a look at math, here we are again with the winter and the winter and the fall, and looking at that green bar getting bigger, the yellow bar smaller, and the red bar smaller, and that's exactly what we want to see. When you guys get your copy of this presentation later tomorrow, you'll be able to see exactly how many students were at each of the levels at the beginning versus at the end of the school year. And then you can see here it's like 1217 out of 1283, because that's the number of students that took both the fall and the spring assessment. Breaking this out for you by grade level, kindergarten again, with the 71% and the 16%, we're really going to watch this closely and see what it looks like in the fall when they're in 1st grade and track them as well. I mean, we look at all of them closely, but it's just higher than we would have expected. 1st grade and 2nd grade, definitely that green bar gets bigger, yellow is getting smaller from the fall, and so is the red. 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, you'll see 5th and 6th grade kind of mimic again what reading looked like, and more of that red, more of that yellow coming into play. Having a lot of conversations at Ritter about Iready. So our Dibbles information, this is our universal screener that we give at every grade level. It was modified this year due to COVID, so we didn't give every subtest that we typically give during a quote-unquote normal school year. At kindergarten, we did give the letter naming fluency assessment at the fall, the winter, and the spring. So you can see 55% of the kids are on level 13 and 32 are below. So a little surprising for letter naming fluency, speaks to the fact that these are 1-minute assessments. So it could be the timing that's throwing them off a little bit, not having that fluency component of the letter naming. And then your phoneme segmentation here, which we definitely have already talked about this. And what are we looking at? Because our curriculum has phonemic awareness in it every day. And so what are we missing? What pieces are we missing when it comes to those letter sounds and mapping them to the letters that they represent? At the end of the school year, we gave those 2 subtests as well as the nonsense word fluency correct letter sounds and the nonsense word fluency words read correctly. So you can see how they performed there. They'll get these assessments at the beginning of 1st grade, so we can see where they were from the end of kindergarten to the beginning of 1st grade as well. 1st grade, nonsense word fluency correct letter sounds. We see here October, February, and June. The difference in the green are your core plus kids, the kids that are above grade level. The yellow is your orange is your strategic or your at-risk students, and your red is your intensive or emergency students as well. This assessment is the nonsense words read correctly, so reading those words in isolation. And they're all nonsense words, which means they're not real words. So you're seeing if they can use the sounds that they know to decode words. Oral reading fluency we gave in February and June, both for words read correctly as well as accuracy, the rate at which they are reading. 2nd grade through 6th grade, the only portion of the assessment that we gave was the oral reading fluency, which was words read correctly and accuracy. You'll see as we go through the grade levels that our accuracy continues to improve. We get up to like the 90% accuracy, but we're not hitting those percentages in the words read correctly. So we're having conversations as to what are we going to do moving forward and what are the meetings going to look like at the beginning of the year. So really taking a look at the launch units that are with Benchmark Workshop for the phonics and word study component and hitting on those skills that the students should have mastered by the end of the previous grade level, and what are those lessons going to look like, and how are we going to assess to make sure that they're understanding those skills that they should have mastered by the previous grade level. But due to COVID, we had our kindergartners lost that, March to June being remote, and then now in first grade having that hybrid at the beginning of this year. So looking at how is that impacting them now 2 years down the road, and what is it that they really need to know that we need to hit the ground running with. So for third grade, our words read correctly, and you can see our accuracy over here on grade level. 90% of the kids are on grade level for their accuracy. But when you compare that to the words read correctly, the words read correctly is where we focus when we're looking for students for intervention services, because that's telling us that they are having a problem decoding. So they're not decoding fluently in order to meet the standards of the benchmark, what they should be able to do in a minute's time out of grade level text.
So the accuracy is within text, right? That's in context, is that what you mean?
So they both are in context,
Okay.
but this is more because that's what we keep having these conversations. Why is our accuracy growing? And when we hit Ritter, it's like 96% of the kids, and that's their rate. Where this is, how many words are they actually reading correctly without errors? So they're both in context, but this is showing that our kids don't have that decoding ability fluently to meet where they should be for words read correctly, the number of words read correctly.
So that's more
And
than
the rate.
fluency, right?
Yes.
As opposed, and then
And
that's
that's,
accuracy.
yes.
Just curious, is it the same passage they read? Like they read the same thing? Like,
No,
it's different.
it's a different one for each time.
Okay.
And then we also have the progress monitoring that's built in as well, and looking at those. And that's one of the things that we looked at too, is when you look at the passages. Like there was an issue in first grade in the winter. They were like, this passage was really hard for the kids, so we took a look at it and we dissected it. And what did they have in that first paragraph to read that they haven't been taught yet? And there was some vowel teams in there, which they don't learn till the end of first grade, and this was in the middle. So we've had those conversations too about making sure that we're analyzing the passages and compared to how the kids are doing. For third grade, you kind of see the same trend here with words read correctly, and then the accuracy mimics what the second grade looks like at that 90% level. Jason.
Quick question. Can you explain the difference to this? Because I don't really understand. What's the difference between words read correctly and accuracy?
So your accuracy is the percentage of words that they're reading correct. It's their rate. How fast are they reading? And then your words read correctly is are they able to decode those words in context?
Okay.
Well,
I don't think
so
I'm
now
explaining-
confused.
I don't think I'm
on the first
explaining
one
it
with
to you.
fluency. So which one is one of those times?
They are both part of the oral reading fluency. So they're both timed.
Okay.
But they separate this assessment into these two components.
So
And
that would be how fast they read.
your accuracy is the number of errors you got over the number of words you read correctly.
Right.
That's
so
your
your
percentage.
instructional level. Or
Right.
your level. Right. So then this is fluency. This is how fast they read. They're not.
Well, it's the number of words they read correctly, where this is the percentage.
Right, so they're not
So-
meeting the benchmark for
Correct.
how many they should be reading fluently at that grade level.
Correct.
So the first one is fluency. How fast are they reading? When they see a word, do they pause and have to decode it? And the second one is how many did they read right as compared to wrong in the text?
So when they have to decode it, they have to sound it out.
Right, it's not
That's
automatic.
right,
Not a
it's-
sight word.
Right. So they're taking their time decoding or struggling to decode some of the words that are at that grade level text.
Okay.
So that defaults back to what we're seeing as part of the phonics issue as to why we pushed phonics so hard these past few years and got the new program. So we are seeing an increase in the data. So the phonics instruction is working because you see the accuracy improving. But their practices to be automatic and fluent to hit that benchmark at 1 minute is where that struggle is coming. Go ahead.
So like, if I understand, say a sentence has 20 words in it, the chart on the right is would show someone that gets 18 of 20 words correct. The chart on the left shows how long they have to take to,
It would be your words read correctly divided by the number of words that they should have read and give you that percentage.
okay, I think I,
So looking at fourth grade, it mimics the same information here with the words read correctly and the accuracy component. The fifth grade, we see the same exact pattern. And now over here in fifth grade, we're at 93% of the students reading at that accuracy level. And sixth grade mimics the same data, the same information.
while you're flipping there, Jamie, are the questions the same at every single assessment?
So they're not questions, it's a
Not
passage
questions,
that the
but-
student actually reads and the teacher hits the timer and the teacher's listening to them read and they're making notes on the paper.
Like what would account for the fact that they're doing poorly in February as opposed to October and June? Like, is the level of difficulty the
The
same?
level of difficulty of the passage, so the.
But that's the same throughout all three
So-
assessments?
No, it
Okay.
gets a little increasingly harder
Harder.
because we are at the beginning of the year, what they should be expected to do versus the middle versus the end. So all of the passages are rated on that grade level, and once you hit the middle to end of year, then it's harder than what they had in the fall.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's not the same
It's not the same
assessment
thing.
in the fall as it is in
No.
the spring?
It's called oral reading fluency, but it's a different passage that they read each time.
It follows where the curriculum should be, it's a ramping scale, so to speak, like.
Yes, so if you say, okay, this is how many words they're reading correctly, and then you're progress monitoring them, there's a trend there that you're looking for, and this is the benchmark, this is where you want them to be. So when the BSI teachers are working with them, the students are reading different passages and they're timing themselves, how many words are they reading correctly per minute, and they're graphing it and they're charting it to see their progress. And they do it versus the first time they read a passage, maybe then the third time they've read that same passage to see if they're getting better and seeing what words are they getting stuck on that they have to take that time to stop and decode and sound out and use their strategies. And are they using the strategies that they should be using at that grade level? So are they using advanced level strategies of the phonics instruction that they've been given, or are they still using basic level strategies and haven't started with those advanced strategies? Because we want to push them to use the strategies that they should be using at that particular grade level.
Okay.
All right, we're going to switch over to math with the math interviews and the reasoning inventories. So these assessments are given one-on-one with the teacher and the students. So bear with me a little bit here. It was harder for me to pull this data out of Lincoln because of the way the data was entered. So this is the overall composite score for kindergarten. They were given this assessment in the middle of the year and the end of the year. And this is with whole numbers. So you can see the composite score for the middle of the year, 89% of our kindergartners were exactly where they should have been. At the end of the year, we have 86% of the students. And then this composite score is broken down into subtests. And each of the grade levels have the same subtest K to 4. So we have 1, 2 more and less, and we have spatial reasoning. So looking at January and May for 1, 2 more and less, it got a little bit more difficult for them. And the tasks get a little bit more difficult for them. By the end of their year, they're asking them to apply those strategies. And then with spatial reasoning, they did much better in January than they did in May. So the math committee is already talking about that, looking at that, and taking a look at the curriculum to see what needs to be adjusted and where was that little bit of that breakdown at that last part of the school year. At the end of the year, this is the only time that they get benchmarks of 5 and 10 and part whole. Historically, benchmarks of 5 and 10 has given us issues across the district. It's one thing that we've had conversations about probably the last 3 years since we've been giving this assessment and infusing more of that, which is really just using your numbers of 5s and 10s to help you mentally add, subtract, multiply, and divide depending on the grade level. So that's for kindergarten. This is first grade. First grade, we're going to start with the composite and compare beginning of year to end of year. So more students on grade level at the end of the year. benchmarks of 5 and 10 beginning to end, so there was definitely some growth there. A little bit of growth when you're looking at the students on grade level, but our red did decrease from 11% to 7%. 1, 2, more and less, definitely a lot of growth with the 1, 2, more and less by the end of first grade, with having 90% of our students on grade level for that subtest. And spatial, at end of the year, we went from 82% on grade level to 78%, but we had more movement from the emergency kids into that at-risk focus. And that's one of the subtests that we will take a look at. This part whole, our math coach saw that data and came to me that day and was like, I know what the issue is. I know what we need to do. And we're gonna talk about it at the math committee, and we're gonna put it in place at the beginning of the year for the curriculum, and it's the different representations of how they're seeing part whole. And what does that look like? So in second grade, they have 2 different assessments. So these assessments are not comparable, because this top assessment is they're getting the whole numbers interview, and at the end of the year, they're getting multi-digit numbers. So can they take what they've learned with whole numbers, 1 to 10, and apply it to numbers that are 2 and 3-digit numbers? Can they take these strategies and apply it? So even though I'm saying they're not comparable in terms of they're not the same assessment, but we want to see where did they lack here and where did they do well, and were they able to take that information and translate it here? So just by looking at this, you can see that 1, 2, more and less, which is here, and spatial, they showed growth in. And looking at benchmarks of 5 and 10 and part whole, those were the 2 issues. So historically, we've seen benchmarks of 5 and 10 being an issue, and that spatial, or part whole. So as I said, as soon as Melissa saw that, she was already requesting a meeting with me, and we were talking about it and what are we gonna do for this, and what did they miss? In third grade, they get 2 different assessments as well. In the beginning of the year, they get the multi-digit numbers, so it's the same one that they get at the end of second grade. And then at the end of third grade, it's the multiplication. So they should be fluent by the end of third grade in multiplication. So looking here, it's the same subtests. So we have our composite score, our benchmarks of 5 and 10, 1, 2, more and less, part whole, and spatial. And you'll see here, they did pretty well overall, but that 1, 2, more and less now became an issue with multiplication. So it wasn't an issue as much in whole numbers, but there still was a little issue, but it became a bigger issue when we saw the multiplication. So what does that mean? And digging deeper into that data. In fourth grade, don't get scared. I know it's a lot of red. In fourth grade, they get 2 assessments at the beginning of the year. So this is beginning of the year, both of these. So the math interview, they get the multi-digit at the beginning of the year, and they get the multiplication, because they should be proficient with multiplication by the end of third grade. Now, this is the year that they missed the end of that third grade year. And I don't want to say missed, because they were still learning virtually, but it was a lot different, and we were in the pandemic. So looking at where they started the beginning of fourth grade with multiplication was not so good.
It was scary, right?
Sue's one of our fourth grade math teachers, so she's shaking her head over there. But really taking a look at that information, and then at the end of fourth grade, they receive the math reasoning inventory. So now can we apply what we've learned for conceptual and computational mathematics? And so it's not as scary when you look at fourth grade at the end of the year, because that math reasoning inventory is more difficult than the interview. And now we're really seeing, can they take the strategies that they have learned up into fourth grade and apply them conceptually to these other situations? So definitely multiplication and division. There's no shock there that that would be an issue when looking at the beginning of the year data with multiplication. Adding and subtracting, computation, we're doing well. Hitting the conceptual part of mathematics in here. So 5th grade, they also take the math reasoning inventory. At the beginning of the year, they take the whole numbers. But at the end of the year, they're taking whole numbers, fractions, and decimals. This, I will tell you, is my fault, because at the beginning of the year, it was the first time we put it in Linkit, and we were only looking at the composite score, and when we extracted the data, we were like, no, we need all of this other information here. So the way we did for 4th grade, that's what it'll look like for this fall, so that way we can break it down, because we ended up having to do it manually at the beginning of the year. So we'll definitely do that for this coming school year. But now can they take what they've learned conceptually with whole numbers and apply it to numbers, whole numbers, fractions, and decimals? And that's what we're taking a look at. Are they using the right strategies, the proper strategies, most efficient and effective strategies mentally to be able to solve problems? And taking a look, whole numbers, decimals, fractions, computation. Definitely gets a little bit harder when you're throwing in the fractions and the decimal computation with the students. And then in 6th grade, it was scary at the beginning of the year. It's still a little scary at the end of the year, but they definitely did make some growth. But being able to take this information to Delcy and let them know this is where we saw gains, this is where they're still struggling, is definitely helpful for those incoming 7th graders. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Zach. You have a question?
Yeah. Your multiplication division numbers in 4th grade, if they're an issue now, like, isn't that going to be like an ongoing thing in 5th and 6th grade when it comes to fractions? Because you do use division and fractions.
Right. We are hoping not, with the way that we're identifying students that need support and the interventions that they're receiving with the math interventionist. So we're being very strategic in those grade levels about the interventionist intervening on their level, but bridging that content to grade level material that they're learning in the classroom and vice versa, so they can make those connections.
Okay.
But we're going to track them very closely.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? All right, Zach, you're up.
Which one?
Your inaugural presentation. Be nice to him. That one.
This one? All right. Okay, so both Jamie and Troy asked me to try to put together a district goal for Iready, specifically dealing with mathematics and reading. And I immediately got nervous because I was like, well, I don't know what everyone knows about Iready. So I have a few requests before we move on any further here. One, I am going to ask you to put your imagination cap on, because I'm going to try to do this a story style, as if you were a 4th grade teacher, or a 4th grade student. Or if you don't want to be a student, be a 4th grade parent, all right? The second is that Curriculum Associates is the parent company for Iready. They've been around for about 52 years, and just this year alone, Iready, they gave out 9 million diagnostics across the nation for students. So we're looking at huge, huge amounts of data from Iready. Now, when I was younger, about 150 years ago, I used to use a scale of 0 to 100. I understood that scale. I understood what a 0 was, because I got a lot of them. I got a lot of 50s, and I occasionally got 100. I understood what those scales meant. Iready is so detailed and has so much data that when you look at their scales, they can zero in exactly and say, this is what a 4th grader should fall in between, or a 3rd grader, or a kindergartner. In K through 12, they have this information. So when you see these scales, they will look different than a 0 to 100. Is kind of what I'm getting at. And as we move forward there, you know, if you're going, why is that not a 0 to 100? And that's why. Okay? So if you would put that cap on and pretend you're that 4th grade student, Iready is a dynamic test. It starts out with you, this particular chart here gives you a sense of how questions are being asked on the test itself. Since you're a 4th grade student for this example, the test starts you out at a 4th grade level. And you take your first question, in this case it's a reading test, and you get that question right. Iready goes very aggressive. It sits there and says, all right, you got that 4th grade material, we're going to shoot you right up the 5th grade material and see how well you did. In this case, you get that, I ruined the whole thing now. All right, so we go to the 5th grade material. In this case, it pushes you up to 6th grade material. But the little red mark means that you got something wrong, and they push you back down. They don't go all the way down to 4th grade. They go down to 5th grade early year, like 5th grade, October, November, somewhere around there. And what ends up happening is you get this bouncing back and forth effect. You get a question correct, you get a question wrong. You get a question correct, you get a question wrong. And that eventually evens out until you get something called a scale score, a very specific numerical number. If I kept going all the way out, these little dots would get closer and closer, we get a straight line. Whatever that straight line comes up to is our scale score. That scale score, and I apologize, this is so small, it's compared to a scale range. So you get a score, it's compared to a scale range, and in this case, for 4th grade reading, our scale range is 557 to 629. A 557 means you're right on grade level for 4th grade. A 629 means that you're like at the end of the year, 4th grade, like you're, I don't know, May, June, somewhere in that area, all right? Now, I'm not trying to ignore mathematics, it's just that my pretty little chart is just for reading, so that's the direction I'm going to go with. It will, the same process applies for mathematics. So as we move forward, you get your scale score, you end up being placed conveniently on a placement level. There's 5 of them. There's on grade level, mid, late, or above, on grade level early, 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below, or 3 grade levels below. So after you take your scale, or take your test to get a scale score, you're placed on a scale level, you're then placed on a placement level. That placement level identifies a targeted growth expectation that you have for the year. They call it your typical annual growth goal. So if I score 1 grade level below on my initial test, for 4th grade, I'd be 20 points for my expectation for growth of that year, whatever it may be. Now again, I'm going to continue on as if we were 4th grade students. This is actual data for 2 4th grade students this past year. So put yourself in either one of them so that we can continue this story a little bit. I'm going to start out with this student right here. And I know this is tight, I'm sorry, but this student took this benchmark on the 1st of October. And since it's their diagnostic 1, they earned a score of 537. 537 is less than 557, so they are below grade level. In this case, they're 1 grade level below where they're supposed to be. 1 grade level below, their growth goal becomes 20 points for the year. This particular student scored a 537. I add 20 points onto it, I get 557. This data, this information is like immediate for any staff member as well as the student the moment they're done taking this particular assessment. If I fast forward through time, we have instruction that occurs, remediation, identification of different things, parties, girlfriends, boyfriends, all that type of stuff happens throughout the year. This student then takes this diagnostic 3, in this case it was on the 18th of May, they earned a 559. All right, 559, the original goal was 537, they made that 20 points and then went up 2 points higher. That means this particular student met their typical annual growth. They went up 20, not only did they go up 20, they went up 2 more. So in this case, Iready, in their terminology, they identified as 110% of typical annual growth. They had a goal of 20, they met that goal of 20, and then, just for giggles, they went higher. They did better, all right? They actually went up higher than the 100% that we're anticipating. Now let's go to our next student. In this case, their diagnostic 1 was taken on the 22nd of September. They scored a 459. That is significantly lower than the 557. As a result, they were 3 grade levels below. Again, I'll go to my little cheat sheet here. 3 or more grade levels below. Their target growth goal is 28 points for this upcoming year. Unfortunately, this student didn't quite get to 28 points. They earned 23 points. So simple division problem, 23 over 28. They met 82% of their typical annual growth goal. Now, in terms of academics, I don't really know where everyone falls. If I was to somehow to convince all of you to give me $1,000 and I said 7 months later, I'll give you an 82% return on that money, I don't know how you feel about that. I still think this child did a very nice job. It did an all right job. But we have to take a look at it, how it looks in terms of a district perspective. So if you take that imagination cap on, I need my board members back so you can see where we're going with this. You can play with that hat later, no one's going to judge you. But here we go, our distribution of progress of annual typical growth. I'm sorry this didn't adjust.
I don't know why it didn't. It's fine on our computer screen, just not on that screen for some reason.
Jamie's sabotaging me.
I have to throw a curveball anyway.
All right, so this is 18-19 data, and this is 20-21 data. And the way that we would read this is 63% of our total student population in 18-19, they met 100% plus their typical annual growth. They were quite literally this student. They had a goal, met the goal, and in some cases went beyond that goal. The next number here, this 11%, that means 11% of our typical, of all our total population, met between 80 and 99% of their typical annual growth. Again, literally, they are that student. All right? Now, obviously, we need to compare the 2 years. We skipped over the pandemic year completely. You will notice the number of students meeting 100% of their typical annual growth dropped to 45% for reading. And we also have a pretty large increase from the number of students meeting 19% or less of their typical annual growth between 1819 to 2020. Now, not to say that this is in isolation. When we go for reading, we do the same thing for mathematics. We have similar information that's popping up. We go from 60 to 38 and then 4 to 24%. That's what was a 500% change, if I'm doing that right? All right, so obviously this is concerning. It's something we want to target and make a particular goal. So in speaking to both Jamie and Troy, and I had the opportunity to meet with the data wizards at Iready. That was an interesting meeting. Anyway, one of the items that we suggested there was that we take a look at more of a multi-stage goal or a multi-year goal. To come in this year and to think that we're going to hit a home run in the first year to get back to that 18-19 data would be difficult. So one of the approaches that we thought might be a good idea to go with is to go with a 3-year plan. In this case, generally what we're thinking is 21-22, we want to try to get back on track to that 18-19 data. When we look at 22-23, we ramp it up and try to push the envelope a little bit more, make sure our percentages are higher. And 23-24, I don't know if we have sports fans out there, but I'm considering more like that as a team option. We take a look at where our growth happens to be here and see where we need to calibrate and adjust and move back for that. Obviously, I'm not really interested in reading to you. I know you all can read, but for organization's sake, you can see what's going on here. Over the 21, 22, 22, 23, and 23, 24 school years, the Township of Franklin Public School District will increase the overall percentage of students in kindergarten through 6th grades attaining 100% plus progress of their annual typical growth in ELA and math as assessed by the Iready diagnostic software. These particular goals are just a rewrite of that particular statement with the appropriate percentages placed in. Now, in terms of summary, so you follow everything that was going on, students take their diagnostic, they get a scale score. That scale score is put on a scale range. They are given a placement level. They give a specific growth goal. They take their 3rd diagnostic at the end of the year and they compare those 2 numbers to see where they happen to grow. They're either at 100%, or 100% plus, or below 100%. Our data for 2021 shows 2 major items, that we had a decrease in those reaching 100% total progress for their typical annual growth, and an increase of those reaching 19% or lower. And obviously that set us up for our general goal that we want as large of a population to reach 100% of their typical annual growth. We wrote it that way because it mirrored pretty much our mission statement that we want to be as rigorous as possible with these particular goals.
I have a question.
Oh, please.
So if I'm reading this correctly, tell me if I'm reading this correctly.
Sure.
So.
Which slide are you on?
I'm on the one before this.
One before this.
How you broke down ELA 60%.
Yes.
So this upcoming school year, 60% of students you want to go meet their growth goal at that first 4th grade.
Yes. The 100% or more. Yeah.
At kindergarten through 6th grade, 6%, not in each grade level, 60% of the entire.
Total district, yeah.
Total district.
So that we would try to.
Would be that one kid. Like
this. So it would mirror this kind of graph right here. Now this is the math one that obviously we'd want it for language arts. Now the original one for language arts back in 1819 was 63%, so we are a 3% difference if we move forward with that. For mathematics, we were looking at how low this was at 38%, and that's why we went for 55.
Oh, so like you said, you want to get back to 18, 19.
Yeah, we want to try to get back to this. I mean, in 1819, these were solid numbers all around. And so, I don't know. I was just reading today, for example, on CNN that they're coming back with the mask thing going on. I don't know what the future's going to look like. If we can try to get our numbers back to this, we'll have a great starting point to make sure that we can kind of push it off a little bit more the following year. That was the general plan.
I think my concern with comparing those 2 is, do we know, obviously our kids were not as low in 18-19 as they were in 2021. So we're looking at typical growth. Do we know what their structural growth was for last year?
We do. I didn't move forward with strength growth once we identified that these were
Because that's
particularly
what's going to
low.
have to happen for our kids to catch up, not the typical growth, right? So the typical growth that happened in 18-19 was with students who were more on level than they are in 2021.
I think that would be
Based on the
appropriate, yes.
data that-
Yeah,
that
I think
just
that would be an
showed,
appropriate
correct?
assumption, yeah.
So my concern is, while that looks like we're just comparing and trying to get back to where we were, we won't be back to where we were because our students aren't starting or aren't ending the way that they ended in 18-19 on their levels. So I think it's a little confusing to say that we're gonna go back to 18-19 in terms of where our goal is for the district. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, based upon where their endpoints
Because typical
are.
growth is based on where they're at. So if
Right.
you have a kid that's 2 years below, he's gonna get 22, 25 points, whatever it may be. He's still gonna be below average.
Absolutely,
Right?
right.
You have a child who's above average, their typical growth will be 20, 19. They'll still be above. So I think the concern that I have is, while, yes, we wanna look at their growth, that's a very good thing to look at. It's going to be hard for us to see how much growth our below-level students have made based on this information.
Well, on this information, those that would meet 100%, it would be regardless of what their particular starting point would be. They would be identified as the typical growth. The stretch growth items that you're specifically talking about is they end up to their particular grade level. The growth, the typical growth specifically is based upon wherever they happen to start out with.
Right.
This is what we would anticipate with a solid year of instruction, or at least 30 weeks in Iready's case, this is where they would end up. If we went stretch goal, they would have these graphs for stretch goal. Our numbers are significantly lower.
Right.
So in terms of trying to get back to normal, as I was mentioned earlier, we went typical growth because it was the most feasible to start out with.
And I understand that, but I think my concern is we're not going to see as a board where our low achieving students, to me, I think that's where the focus should be. Not, yes, we'll have a district goal, obviously, but I would like us to look at those kids that are 2 years below and 1 year below and try to get some of them to a stretch growth as opposed to just a typical growth. Because we're never going to catch them up if we're just looking at their typical growth year after year after year. Because you have to get the stretch growth for them to get them to the point where they're on level.
So your adjustment would be to tier this out as
To
far
do
as?
it targeted to the lower, the low, the low. I see what you're saying.
So are you looking for like the mobility part of, they started the year 2 grade levels below and we want them up to on grade level, or did they go up to 1 grade level below?
Right, I mean, I think it's hard, I mean, I understand that, trying to go back, but our kids aren't where we were in 18-19.
The starting points are different.
Yes, so,
Yes.
and we can't see that that information is not aggregated out in that graph.
Right.
So I think for us to really work on trying to close the gap for our kids during this pandemic, we've got to make some serious adjustments to their instruction and to us monitoring them and making goals that are high but can be met, at least for some of them. That's my feeling. We're never going to catch them up if we just do typical growth. We're not. And I think that's a fault that we would have if we did that.
Okay.
Piggybacking off of that, my question is very, very similar, but the typical growth that's planned, if I'm 2 grade levels below and I meet typical growth, say 3 years in a row, will I eventually be on grade level? So I think.
It depends on how much above the typical growth you'd be making.
Okay, but
So-
if I hit 100%, if I need 20 and I hit 20 3 years in a row, let's
No,
say.
you'd still be
I
wherever
would
you're-
still be wherever I was,
Yes.
okay.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
So
each
those are the
grade
goals
level.
that we have, sorry, I mean, those are the goals that we have for our schools. We aggregate that data out for the schools. So when we're looking at a district goal, we were trying to encompass all of the students, because that's what we've done in the past. So this is a good conversation to have, that goal doesn't end here, that overarching goal. And then we have more specific goals for each school and each grade level.
Well,
and then-
and I think with the fact that the way the year, crazy year and a half that
Right.
we've had,
Right,
maybe our district goal doesn't look like they used to be in the past,
Right.
right? Because we really have to focus on a population of children that struggled during this time. So I feel like that's where our spotlight needs to be on, not that we're gonna ignore any other students or not look at their data or want them to stretch growth as well, but we're gonna have to look at those students because they're gonna need some serious intervention as opposed to those kids that are starting on online or
Right.
on target or
Right.
above level.
And I would think if it were just a normal year, the last few years, this would probably be a goal that you always wanted to, like this, something you always wanted to attain. And this particular past, 18 months or whatever, I agree, maybe it should look a little different because this is what we always want to do, right?
I don't even know that we would have focused in on this because we were already hitting that 65% growth. Like, we focused in on it, but not like this. This
Yeah.
is something that we were like, oh, we've had a lot of conversations about, do we lower it? Are we looking at the 50? But I
see,
mean,
to
if
me,
we
I wouldn't
can,
even I would expect that to be 100%. I would expect 100% of our kids to meet typical growth this year. Why do we only want 60% of them to meet the typical growth? Why do we only want 55% of them? And then, we don't even know which, like I said, which kids are below level that are where they're at. Even that 100% growth in typical growth isn't gonna get them where they need to be.
So,
And
just
it's
so I
not
understand,
to-
if we were at 100% typical growth every single year,
That's what they expect you to do. That's a regular year.
nothing would change ever. We would just, every student
Yes.
would
What
stay the
it would
same.
represent is that where that student currently happens to be at, that they in fact showed that they were supposed to learn whatever level that they were supposed to learn throughout that. They wouldn't go past whatever grade level they happened to be at. So if you came in at a third grade level and you were a year behind or something along those lines, you would stay at a year behind, but you would be making the growth that would be appropriate for where you currently are at.
But at the end of that year, you're still 3 years behind,
Still.
and the next year you make 100%, you're still 3 years behind.
Yes.
Correct.
Right.
and we want to be really careful too about making sure, we learned about the mobility of the kids in our district too. So if we want to tease this out to the students that are at those lower levels, then we want to make sure that those are the students we're looking at from year to year.
I mean.
'Cause they're
obviously
moving
some of those
in and
things
out.
will be out of your hand, right? Like,
Right.
well,
Right.
12 of these kids left. What are
Right.
we gonna do? Get back every other test? You know what I mean? Like, but either way, right now, there are kids. So
Right.
we have to
Absolutely.
assume that there'll be our kids at the end of
So
the
I'm
year.
saying, moving forward, if we did that, Michelle, and then the numbers are different, like your end number, because we had kids move out or kids move in.
Right.
We have to remember, we have
Just
to
like
take
the
that
next
into
SGO, when
consideration
you
with the,
change, you know,
exactly.
One of your kids leaves or you have to change your
Yeah.
SGO. I don't know, like, that's just my feeling, that's just so, I'm just.
I think our feelings are all the same, because like our mindset right now is, I have 26 kids at risk in 4th grade. I know that, I know the 26 kids in math, like,
And
that's
what-
exactly
right.
what we're looking at. Like, I know exactly what they're missing, what they need, and I've got a little plan devised in my head that I'm gonna try to sell to them. So, but I think we're all thinking the same way.
Right.
What you're thinking, if we look at the stretch growth, we can't look at the stretch growth from last year. We have to look at
Right.
the stretch growth from 2 years ago to see even in the playing, what would it be, where were they doing, and how could we improve that?
Right.
Looking at the stretch growth 2 years ago wouldn't be an issue. That's,
It's
what
where they
came
are,
up
right.
was is
We
that
won't know that
even
till
under
they take the
typical
test
growth,
in
we
September
only
what
had
their stretch growth
63%
will be,
meeting.
Or what their stretch.
What their
growth could be.
projected stretch
Yes.
growth would be.
So that's why I started with the typical growth,
Right,
because
and
this is where we're
I
at.
completely understand that. I
Right.
just feel like,
No, your comment that everyone should be making their typical annual growth is, that's what we all want. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean?
yeah, I don't necessarily know if that's a goal that we want to make for the district then, in terms of what's transpired. Like, I feel like our goal needs to be more geared at catching up with the students that we need to catch up. And what are we going to do, and what are we going to expect them to look like at the end of the year? What do we
Yeah,
hope
I'm
for them
trying
to
to think
look
of the
like,
way
and
that
then what are
we
we
do
going to
that
do to get
stretch.
them there?
Do you make your actions?
See, that's what now I'm thinking, like how would you make it on stretch? We'd have to compare what the stretch was 2 years ago to what we actually did this year, the number of students that
But
actually
your
did that.
mobility is so high, you're not even gonna be comparable to what students you have.
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, let me,
I know what
let me play
she's
with it.
saying.
I know what she's saying too, I'm trying to see
And I think
what
our
that would look like.
actions need to
'Cause
be-
I feel like it's almost like a bucket. You
You tier it, you know, almost
have to
tier
tier it out.
not even, it's just like a percentage of students,
It has to
maybe a
be
year and a
like
half growth.
It has to be
according
like the
Iready.
SGOs are done.
Or,
It
you
has
know what
to
I
be
mean?
No,
Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
I do.
even just
Yeah.
like, I don't know, like, I'm just.
This is how our SGOs are done at Main Road, like they're tiered out off of student growth. And the kids who are higher aren't going to make as much stretch growth because
Yeah, that's
historically,
that's that part, like when
our
you're
higher
above,
kids-
your levels of
Right.
actual growth are typically small.
Well, and then my
That's-
other concern is we have everybody in that, right now, in that district goal, that 55 and 60% is everybody. Well, okay, our on-level and above-level kids are probably going to carry most of that percentage. So there again, you have your lower kids that we don't know what's going on through this district,
Yeah.
through this goal.
All
I'm
right,
not
so-
saying that nothing's being
All
done. for
right,
them.
so this was a conversation that we had because it talks about typical median growth and going that direction. And when we looked at that, we're like, I don't know if necessarily we want to throw out typical median growth because it would look at if you had, one student in your class go like 300% growth, and then you had 6 or 7 students in your class do 0.
Right.
All right, it throws that off completely where you have 20 people in your class and you only have, I don't know, a third of the class actually make any growth. It's one of the reasons why we decided to go this route, because you'd literally as a teacher be looking at your entire class and saying, I need to make this percentage of every single student in the room. You increase the number of students that would meet that success. That's, yeah, no, I like that, I like it. I'm not quite sure how to do that though. We would have to go with a
No.
tiered approach with it.
I know how to do it.
Oh, good. At least somebody in the room does. Yeah.
I know how to do it. I'm not sure what it looks like as a district goal.
And if that means the district goal looks a little different than our district goal, but that is our district goal. Our district goal is to catch these kids up.
Right.
So I think it should, that's what we should reflect in that, I would hope. I just don't know that that reflects that.
Maybe year
No, it
one.
would reflect more of a
Do you
just
go
an
year
overall
one
district.
as typical growth and year 2 as stretch?
All right, from
Trying
looking
to-
at the
trying
stretch
to
goals
gauge
in
that
Iready,
stuff.
our numbers are significantly
What?
low. So you would see, decent percentages here, but you would be somewhere in the 20s and 30s in these percentages. And how you tease that out, I'd have to play around with that. see how
Can
it works.
you go back to a couple
18.
slides? I don't remember what
Sure.
slide it is. I'll tell you. Okay, go for it. I'm sorry.
You're good, man, you're good.
Maybe I'm imagining thing.
So do you see, like, right there, if you go back to that
Where
one,
it
that's
says
where the
This
stretch
one?
growth.
This one?
The stretch
No,
growth,
that
no,
one.
the other one.
This one?
That one.
Like, see how far away they are
Oh,
from
yeah,
the stretch growth?
they're way off here, yep. Because that particular student's 3 grades behind.
Right, so at that point, that kid's never gonna make it up, never gonna make it up.
Maybe, so are you able to adjust the numbers? Like say, okay, this person's goal right here was 20 points, they hit 22. Are you able to adjust that individual student's number? I don't know what kind of data you're looking like.
Well, that's, when she was speaking about the stretch goal, that's that particular line there, the expectation. If you reach that and you did it over a successive number of years, you would eventually get this student 3-4 years down the road on the particular grade level that they would need. But they would need to continue doing that over a course of several years to catch up.
I mean, and like you said, the lower kids do typically make the bigger gains.
Right.
So I do think it is attainable for these lower kids to hit some of these stretch goals, hit some of their stretch goals. I mean,
If we hit them hard,
what kind of interventions are you guys
we
thinking
have
about?
to,
What-
I mean,
what do you-
we have to, it's actually not a choice. If we're gonna get them on level, we have to start getting some of these kids to make more than a year's growth this year. We just have to, and we have to figure out how to do it.
For a district goal standpoint, are we able to, instead of looking at this is everybody in 4th grade, can we just instead look at this is everybody who was 2 grades behind, everybody 1 grade behind?
That's what we were
Yeah.
talking
And
about,
then,
tearing it out.
and then tearing it out, and then kind of saying, these people, these individuals.
So it would be, I think it would be appropriate to say that everybody who is already on grade level should meet 100% of their typical annual growth, or their stretch growth, whatever growth would happen to be. When you would go down 3 grade levels below, your percentage might look different compared to what it would be, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Not necessarily percentage, but I would like maybe like an average like per spread. That Iready, I'm unfamiliar with the software exactly what it does. It breaks out every single individual student, or is it just say if you're 2 grades below, you need 20 points this year?
All right, so yes, it does break out every single student, but it places them in one of these 5 categories.
Okay, so can we play with that category and say, all right, 2 grades level below, we usually want a 23 growth, but we know from our data that on average, they need 30 for a stretch growth. Can we just bump that to 30 and then assess 2 grades level below at the year end, see how close they got to the 30?
It's just meeting the stretch growth.
Or we can do an average based off of the scale, how
That's
far
where the
away they
median,
are.
we could do the median that way. We could do, what he's describing, we could do the median
Yeah.
growth there and pick that particular number and move forward from there.
Just
So,
my
yes.
suggestion. I don't know, okay.
So yes,
cool.
we could.
Okay, I don't know if everybody else is happy with that, but I was just
That's
trying
what
to.
she's saying,
Yeah, put it on paper somehow, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're both saying the same thing in a different way.
Just a
I
different,
think,
Okay.
right, and I don't know what it'll look like, you know, like I said, Jason, or Jonathan just gave an idea, but something where we are looking for some of our kids at least to make more growth than they typically would in a year because they need to eventually catch up to where they need to be.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So board as a whole would like us to go back and look, put that together, yes?
Yeah, run that by me once again.
It's basically tier it out.
Bas-
So the kids that are 3 grades below will need X stretch growth, 2 grades below will need what percentage.
I just had a question, like in the classroom, like from a teacher's perspective, do they teach each, they have all this information so they can target
Yeah.
kids individually?
Well, literally, after they take the first diagnostic, it's available for staff, students, guardians, whoever wants to take a look at it. Absolutely.
So if I'm a teacher, I get a roster of my 20 students, I'm gonna see asterisks next to these 5, that like I really need to focus on these 5.
So sometime at the end of September or early October, you would be taking this assessment.
Right.
And you would get that information that day after they're done taking. So whatever we kind of tease this out to look like, they'd be able to compare. Like, all right, any student who fell in 2 grades below, that's our number of growth that we
And are our classrooms like randomized, so like, do we have like advanced classes and then basic classes, and or how's that work?
We do at certain grade levels, yes. So in 5th and 6th grade, we have A-level classes,
Right.
general education classes, intervention classes.
So you don't have a class that you have all above, or you do have a class that everyone.
We do in
would be
5th and 6th grade,
1 to
yes.
2 grade levels below, so the teacher can be more focused on those particular areas, I guess,
Just in 5th and 6th grade.
just in 5th and 6th. So in the other grades, you get what you get.
You get a mix and then you differentiate.
Well, you
Right.
get a mix based off of the data. So the data is definitely used to create those rosters. So you're not loading the classrooms with all of the kids that are below grade level for one teacher. We're looking at doing a couple different things moving forward with how we're providing interventions to our students and how we're differentiating within the classroom with our interventionists as well as for the gifted and talented students as well.
Gotcha.
So I think this is something we can definitely
Tomorrow, I'll get it.
put our heads together and come back with.
Let me ask one more thing, I'm
Sure.
just curious, and it kind of goes off of this. So, Jean, you said several times you guys are having conversations, the math coach, the groups, and everyone. What kinds of things are you guys thinking about doing, like what's going to look different this year? Anything, can you kind of tell us?
Let's advance to the last slide. All right, so looking ahead with the.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With the last round of money that we just received from the government, and it has to be used in the next 3 years. So here are things that we would like to do with that money. So I feel like you guys are like.
Binoculars.
Increase the coaching supports for all of our staff and students. And what does that look like? By increasing the number of coaches, instructional coaches that we have in the district. So we are finishing out our 3-year grant for the New Jersey Tiered System of Support Early Reading Grant. The next phase of that grant in K-3 is data-driven instructional coaching model. So it's an extension of the New Jersey Tiered System of Support grant that is going to give us another 3 years, where there's a coach allocated directly to this grant that works with teachers and interventionists in grades K through 3 specifically, and they get trained by Rutgers University on how to work with classroom teachers and interventionists together, and what does that goal look like. And the first year, we start off with 2 kindergarten teachers, 2 first grade teachers, 2 second, 2 third, and a coach that works with them explicitly. Formalizing the math tiered system of support. So the math committee is working on formalizing the tiered system of support for math, because the grant helped us formalize our tiered system of support for reading and language arts. So we have a loose tiered system of support for math, and we are looking to formalize that for this school year and get that very structured and put into place. Increasing the full-time BSI positions. So, yay! We're decreasing the number of part-time. We still will have a couple part-time BSI teachers, but overall at Jamvier, we won't have any part-time BSI teachers. It will be all full-time BSI teachers. Over at Main Road, we increased your full-time by 1 and kept 1 part-time. Same thing over at Ritter. Increased by 1, well, actually increasing by 2. 2 at Amy's. And looking to increase by 1 over at Ritter and keeping 1 part-time. The one-to-one Chromebooks in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. So every student, kindergarten and 2nd grade, will have a one-to-one Chromebook. So that's a huge shift than what, not from this year, because everybody kind of had one, but now it's how are we implementing that and what does it look like? Gifted and talented, for those of you that are on the policy committee, we had a long conversation about how we're now identifying students for math and for ELA. So putting supports in the curriculum and providing that professional development and supporting those teachers, not only are we differentiating for our students that are below level that we need to bring them up, but we also need to challenge the students that are on and above level and continue to have them grow as well. The STEAM integration into the computer literacy classes, more special education support for the staff and for the students, and hopefully with these coaching supports increasing the articulation with Delcy and ELK across the board.
Can you just elaborate a little bit, Jamie, on the special education? Is that more staff or more training?
We're still having those conversations as what exactly will it look like. We've tossed around different ideas for additional services beyond what they receive in the classroom. So if we wanted special ed students to receive reading specialist support, but in their resource room and in self-contained, they're already getting training in Norton Gillingham. They have Spire. So we don't want to remove them out of those classes to get reading specialist supports, because then they're missing that. So it's almost like in addition to, and what would that look like and where could that look like? It could also look like a coach for staff for the special education teachers in terms of being that differentiation specialist and helping the special ed teachers differentiate appropriately for the levels of the students that they have.
Is there any kind of tutoring that we're thinking of maybe offering?
So that we did with the last grant. We have in the, what is it, Trish? ESSER 2 funds.
Yes.
We put in funds for before and after school tutoring, and that is also taking care of 3 years of the summer school. So the summer school for the open enrollment summer school looks a lot different this year than it ever has in the past, but we've been able to incorporate phys ed, STEAM, art, and music, and the kids are loving it. And we've had more like kids that signed up for math camp. After they went to math camp, the parents were calling us in the afternoon saying, do you have room for them in the ELA camp? My child is begging for me to come, to let them come. We had another parent call and say, my child fought me all morning and didn't want to come to summer school, and he loved it. After the first day, he had the best time and wants to come every day. Can you fit him in? So that's a part of that other money. So yes, but that's on the table too. Looking at our math interventions at Ritter, and in 4th grade, we're going to be doing something a little bit different and focusing more on the tier 3 aspect of mathematics, because we haven't really been able to have the staff to do that. Like, we look at our reading specialist as tier 3 for reading, but we've never had a math specialist where the kids would go to for that tier 3. So the way that we're doing that is looking at the data and determining, okay, these kids need intervention, these kids need remediation, and partnering an interventionist with a classroom teacher. So I don't want to call it co-teaching, I want to call it cooperating, because we're going to pull those intervention kids out, and the intervention teacher is going to be with the intervention kids, and the classroom teacher will be with the remediation kids, but they're both working at the common goal of scaling them to grade level. So the hope is they move from the intervention room back into their classroom, and we're tracking their growth that way. So we're doing that in 6th grade, 5th grade, and 4th grade this year, with the goal of it going into 3rd grade the year after that, and 2nd grade the year after that. So that's a part of the supports for staff and for students. And then contracting out some services. So we've contracted with First Children's Services. They're actually already working with us for the summer. They're doing counseling for Tier 3 kids in summer school. We didn't have any counselors for the summer program. They're also doing SEL activities with class-wide with some of the summer school classes. They are also providing professional development for the staff at the start of the school year, wrapped around our SEL goals for the district and for each of the schools, with working very closely with the Sel Committee, but also looking for, Amy's had more conversation with them about the school year for the Tier 3 counseling, but almost like an INRS process for counseling, and who would do that, and referring them to First Children. Am I saying that correctly?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We also talked about behavioral services. So like a behaviorist and contracting out and having some consultant work with the staff, work with students that need that, the individual.
But I mean, it's more of like providing
plans.
consultative, but it would be more consistent, because like right now, when we have a child, unfortunately, knock on wood, this year was different because we didn't have a lot of behavior issues, but in the past, we have an issue, we have to reach out, it takes 2 to 3 weeks. By that time, I mean, instruction, so looking at hiring somebody on a contractual basis to be here like consistently 2 to 3 days a week, like that they can spread it out through the district, so we always know that somebody's going to be coming back quickly.
And it's nice too, because we just found out that the First Children's Services offers that support, so we're going to talk to them to see what does that look like from them versus what we would typically get from people that we've used in the past, to see if that's the direction we want to go in.
One of the things that they do too is, and we don't always think because we're in Gloucester County, and yes, COVID hit here, we lost a lot of grandparents, a lot of parent figures. They passed away in the past year. And that was one of the things we talked to First Children's Services about, was the impact that had on so many of our students, and that they may need counseling, they may need support. Also, the work refusal, I think is pretty clear in our 4th, 5th, 6th grade data, that we started to see that work refusal, and we started to see those red grow in those areas. A lot of that is the kids just not saying they wanted to do the work anymore. We're going to see that as a major issue coming in. So talking to First Children's, we've already said to them, our data is showing us this. We know that our teachers are going to need this coming in. How are we going to get these kids back and build their stamina?
Mm-hmm. So the kids are just coming to a point and saying, enough, I'm done.
Right, well, it's almost like when they were remote, when they were home, there was more flexibility. I mean, I know there was at my house with my son.
Right.
So if they weren't on and I'm in a meeting, then he's gonna do that later, so he gets a break. But now he's back in school, he doesn't get to have that break, like he has to do it then. So we did see, once we came back in person, a lot more of the behaviors thirding up with the, like, I'm not gonna do it now, I don't want to. So, more so than we did.
Which is something you've never had to deal with before, because we've never been in a pandemic.
Well, we've had to, but I don't think it's been to this
Not on this
extent. There was
extent.
more kids,
Right.
if I'm speaking correctly.
Yes, well, and the data's showing that. So, you know, the prediction of what are we brainstorming, what are we going to be faced with in September? We're going to be faced with staff stamina. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, like,
nap time?
I love a good nap. If you're all for
15-minute
it.
power nap.
Yeah.
No, but it's the reality. I mean, the kids have had, you know, 1 o'clock days. Some of them went home and their parents were there having them get on. Some of them never showed up. It's a reality that we need to be ready for. We're gonna have to be really creative this year. But when talking to them, there were some key points that they brought up that we brought to the Sel Committee that really were like, we need to gear up and get ready. Like, typical growth. It's gonna be scary, but we can do it. We can do
So,
anything.
we also took the opportunity to start looking at some professional development, like some big names of professional development, bringing some big people in to have motivational speaking with our staff. And the standards-based grading committee, hitting the reset button back to grading, like what, we need to get back to the standards-based grading and what is that focus, and bringing the parents into that. And, you know, can we bring in a Rick Wormley and a Ken O'Connor after we've been studying all their research for all these years? Now allows us the flexibility to be able to afford to have somebody come in like that in the district and work with our teachers. Rather, before you're going in a consortium with other school districts and trying to share that person, and then you have them in a big auditorium with 500 people and they're not getting that face-to-face time with those big names in education. So looking at that as a possibility. And then social and emotional learning supports, like Amy said, for the staff as well as the students, but enhancing and building upon that morning meeting. And what are the goals and the objectives? We use the responsive classroom. All of our teachers have the morning meeting book, but we really need to enhance and build what we're doing with that time with those students. Continue to develop the capacity for effective emotional well-being checks. What does that look like? You guys all, well, for those of you that were here, I think it was last year or the year before, remember I brought the color charts and asked you how you were feeling at the beginning of my presentation and how you felt at the end. So really honing in on that, and what is that data telling us? This year for grades 3 and up, we used a program called Close Gap, and it's free. And the students get on and they choose how they're feeling. It also has them choose, you know, how does their body feel? Is it matching how they think they're feeling? And learning that vocabulary. And are they, what is their energy level for the day? And do they need to speak to an adult? And talking with, oh my goodness, Troy, I just lost his name, our strategic planning guy. Bill, thank you. In talking to him, he was like, you can track that data? I said, yeah, we can go back and look at a student for the whole month, and you know, and see, are there certain times of the month, are there certain times of the school year when they're down or when they're up, and what does that look like? And he was like, that's phenomenal, and that's something that we're continuing. Stop it. Tracking you monthly either. Yeah. Health and wellness challenges. So what does that look like for our staff? And being able to provide some health and wellness challenges with some rewards that go along with them. And maybe it's Fitbits and, you know, things of that nature, and shakes from the nutrition shop, and bringing in a food truck for the staff on a PD day. And what does that look like? The professional development I added in here too, because we specifically partnered with First Children's Services to help us provide some professional development. But moving beyond the activities, like we had a lot of staff activities, like we would do a walk, we would do yoga, some lunches, but moving beyond just the get-together social aspect of social and emotional learning, and really kind of come together and challenge each other for that health and fitness, and foster those positive relationships with their colleagues through different social events, and not just, you know, a walk in the morning before school starts or after school starts, but really kind of honing in. I know they already planned a splash pad get together, and that splash pad in Deffert for next week. They're planning a beach day for the staff at the end of August, so putting that out there. They created a Facebook group for the SEL Franklin Township teachers social events, and they're posting things on there. So even going out to dinner and at a place that has outside dining with fire pits, and trying to plan some activities like that to do with the staff. So definitely looking a little bit different, but wanted to have the conversation here with you tonight to see if these are things that you would support, because these mean hiring new positions or hiring more positions of what we have already. So any questions that you have that we can answer for you.
Nothing's great. Hire, hire, hire. We need we need these supports. We need more staff. Yeah.
If I may ask,
Sure.
I heard it mentioned an SEL committee,
We do have a district-wide SEL committee.
and how is that comprised?
So all 3 of our counselors are on the committee. A child study team member, she's social worker, school psychologist, right? School psychologist, one of our teachers, and a paraprofessional.
And me.
And me, and her, and that one over there.
I'm just curious.
Yes. Anybody else?
No, it's great.
Yeah, you answered my question.
Good. I was
have a
like, let's
question.
just
I'm
get to
sorry.
that slide.
Social and emotional learning. So for the 3rd and 4th grade groups, I know that you said we don't have, I forget the proper terminology, the jargon, forgive me, but you don't have a math specialist to come and pull.
Oh, I
or you
meant
don't
across
have-
the district. We don't have, so our math interventionists have always been able to deliver tier 2 instruction, which is more of a, actually, they're seeing the kids that need intervention, but they're not able to ever see the kids that need remediation. So there's still a group of kids that we're missing that need that extra support. But we haven't had enough people to be able to hit everybody as a whole. So it has kind of been like, if you're the most needy, you get to see the interventionist, but if you just need a little bit of help and support, sorry, we don't have enough staff to see you. So now we can actually set, if we're able to increase these positions, we are able to set up for the next 3 years a plan of how we're going to target those kids, how they're going to be seen, who's going to see them, when will they transition in between the tiers of support, and what that will look like.
Okay.
For ELA, we've always had interventionists and a reading specialist.
And so that's more of like an enrichment time? Like, that's what it used to be called when I was in school.
So some of it will occur during enrichment, and some of it will occur during their regular
Yeah.
math and ELA classes.
For the kids that are most in need, we have a model where we're gonna hit them hard,
Mhm.
and I don't know how else to describe it. Like, the intervention room is taking those standards and teaching them the skills they need to bring them to those standards.
The skills and the strategies. The thing we're missing, the thing that we're working on with the teachers and professional development, and I'm sorry, Sue, she's on our math committee, but something that they're talking about is training the teachers that are the interventionists to scale the interventions to grade level.
Right.
So we're seeing growth in kids that get intervention, but they're still not at grade level. But they're growing in intervention, but they're not taking what they're learning and applying it to the grade level material. So we're missing that piece as well.
Gotcha, so we need to pick them up, but then we also gotta manage burnout, which is why we need First Children's Services and these kinds of social and emotional learning support.
First Children's Services is more for like your tier 3 kids that are coming in with a lot of things from the outside in, really supporting those students.
Okay.
With their
And
mental health.
With their mental health.
Yes.
And things
Mhm.
that child may not be able to control. And
Okay.
giving them the strategies and support that they need. So that's more like a tier 3. It's not your,
Yeah, so that specific one has its tailor, but I guess my point was that we're also trying to grip or get a grasp to help these children with burnout that we've seen due
Mhm.
to, as you've mentioned.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then just a question or just a thought, for social and emotional learning. So
Mhm.
we don't, in grades 3 and 4, I think it was mentioned, I may be incorrect here, we don't separate the classes out into math, like math A, math B?
no.
Well, we don't,
No.
if you're looking at like A-level gen ed, no, we don't do that.
Okay, but you do separate them out in that one classroom, so you would know 10 of my students are above, or 10 are on, 3 are
Yes.
below, 1's at risk.
So one of the
Yes.
first things that we do with the staff during that open PD is, or during a PLC, is taking a look at their data from the fall
Mhm.
of the kids that they have in their class right now, and being able to say, okay, and then they're gonna administer the fall assessment data, and again, see where they are in analyzing that data, so they know exactly where their students are.
Okay, gotcha. So now that I have an understanding of all that, I have seen, or I think maybe be a little familiar with studies for social and emotional learning,
Mhm.
that if you are to teach somebody something, it reinforces it for you. Maybe for those classrooms, if, just a suggestion, we could leverage children who are above to help catch up our lower children. Is that something? And from a social and emotional learning standpoint, I just remember being in elementary school and being put into groups in classrooms of, you know, we were the smart kids and these kids are not as intelligent, they're struggling, and that created a diversion of, that almost fostered an environment of bullying. You know, the jocks hang out with the jocks and they make fun of the kids who don't run as fast.
Right.
And so from a socially emotional learning standpoint, I think that would, just a suggestion or just an idea, throwing it out there in the universe, speaking into existence.
Yeah, that's where the morning meeting comes in that they have, where they're talking about the acceptance and responsibility and differences in each other. And the climate and the culture has changed dramatically in the classroom since we've put this into place. And really understanding how everybody is on different levels and everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses and how they come together and support one another to do that.
Okay, and so we are seeing growth in that
We are.
area. Good. I like that.
But I think the teachers too, it's not like, you know, the Blue Jays, because I remember back in the
Yeah.
day, you know.
Mhm.
But even though
The
we're
Eagles, the Blue
differentiating
Jays.
and
Yeah.
during, you know, the group time, those teachers do need to separate on certain skills with the kids that are lower and higher. But then there's other times that the teachers are using things like interests, like I'm gonna partner, you know, put these kids over here because I know they have these interests. And there's groups of kids that are working with high kids and low kids, so it's not just like, these kids are always here. Because
Okay.
even for the special ed kids, like that are included, like you'll go in there and it's not like I'm saying, here's my special ed kids that are sitting in the corner, kids, you know, like,
Right.
you wouldn't know who they were all the time. There is a portion of that period where they have to be specifically in a group of kids that are similar to them. But other than that, the teachers are, you know, setting up groups all different ways for different activities, so.
Great.
And they do help each other out.
Good, good. That's all my questions. I'm done.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna skip this class. Can I go back? Anybody else?
Are we noticing that kids are bouncing from one tier to another, then back down to the other? Or once they get out of that tier, are they continuing to grow?
So it depends.
Okay.
So one of the reasons we didn't do a district goal for tiers is because the focus of our tier changes depending on the time of year and where they are in the curriculum. So for the first part of the school year in the fall, we're focusing on skills that they should have mastered by the end of the previous grade. And we're taking a look at the curriculum and saying, these are the skills they're gonna learn from September to December. So for intervention, we're not focusing on these skills. We're focusing on the skills that they should have mastered already. And then we hit that winter data and we're looking at that progress monitoring. Well, now our goal has shifted. We're looking at the data for a different purpose because now they've learned this from September to December. So that winter data, I'm gonna start picking up kids that are struggling with what they were taught in the fall. So the focus of the instruction changes based on the time of year. So it's not as clean as we want, you know, if you're in a tier 3, we want this many kids to move to a tier 2 to move to a tier 1 because the focus of the instruction is changing based off of the curriculum and the time of year.
Okay.
But we are taking a look at those kids that always seem to be in that tier regardless of the time of year and making goals and plans to shift them up. So that's why it was difficult for us to bring a district goal to you in terms of the number of kids in tiers.
Got 2 more questions. The first question, so would it be feasible, or I don't know what the best practice is or the industry standard, would it be feasible or recommended to possibly break out these students into like the 3rd and 4th grade into a Math A and Math B? Or do we just not have the support of staff to do that, or is it just not a best practice?
It's not
Just
the
a
best
question.
practice.
It's not.
I mean,
Okay.
it would,
We did that when I first came here. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been here the longest probably, and well, you guys probably remember, because there was like the A group, the B group, the C group, and then like one teacher had all of the low kids, and that's really difficult and
Right.
challenging. And I know when I came in, we were much worse off, like as far as where we are with data than we are now. So I mean, back then, that's what we did, and it
It's-
didn't work.
But that also lends itself
It's a
to
tricky game.
those kids, that's the ceiling. The C kid, what is the ceiling, is a C level. And there's a lot of research that shows that you shouldn't do that in regards to a C kid will only be a C kid, a B kid will only become a B kid because they're not being interacted with. Just like what you said a little earlier, interacting with some of those quote-unquote smaller kids.
Challenged by.
Yeah, I think No, I think my question was more geared towards the line, in 5 and 6, they have the universal classroom, but then they go to their math teacher, they go to their reading teacher.
Oh, they do that, all
Yeah,
the way
so-
down to second grade.
So they
have
do that all the way,
homework.
okay, that was my
Yes,
question.
they do,
Okay.
yes,
Right.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your
But I
question.
think what you're saying is, like, if you can create the environment where you had, like, say, 10 kids in the class, and you had someone that's really skilled to work with those 10 really struggling students, if we could do that, we're gonna do it. You know what I mean? We just need to figure out where we're gonna spend this money.
Well, we're meeting on Monday.
Right, we're meeting on Monday.
We're meeting on Monday to rest our main road.
Right.
Okay, good.
But you're thinking the exact same way we're thinking, like 26 kids in the red in math, 4th grade. What are we gonna do?
Right.
Game 1.
But I do think, one of the big changes that I have seen this year is the collaboration and the fact that we're putting our intervention plans online. So I know when I go in, like, there hasn't always been the best collaboration between like BSI and general ed because there's not enough time for them to talk. So sometimes it was like the BSI teacher was doing something, the classroom teacher had no idea what they were doing. Now all of our intervention plans for each student are listed in real time. So I'm a classroom teacher and I know exactly what that BSI or that intervention is working on with my kids. So when I'm, in the classroom working with them, I'm actually able to support those things as well, which I think has been phenomenal. And when I go in and I see teachers looking at these plans, trying to carry that skill back into the classroom, because I think that's what's lost lots of times. Like, they're working in a small group, they get the skill, but they can't transfer it back into the classroom. So the collaboration that I see that's really been this year with those plans, I think has been phenomenal. And even for us from special ed standpoints, like, we're able to meet on kids and talk about the data and look at, here's the goals. They've been working with reading specialists 5 days a week. It's not working, like, they need something else. So that type of collaboration that's going on, I think, is making huge differences with what's going on in the classroom as well.
This is great, I love this.
Sorry, can I?
Yes.
And
It's not public comment yet.
I was about to say something. And when classes are put together, instead of just A group, B group, C group, I think it's important, especially if you're teaching the lower group, it's hard to have all the same level students because you want to teach all levels equally. You want to give them all the challenge, all the opportunity to learn what they're supposed to learn. And I think, a skilled teacher can pick out as you're doing this, okay, this one didn't really get it, so we're going to have to pull them to the side, or this one to the side, but to offer them the same opportunities to understand the curriculum is important. Also, when you put classes together, behavior issues. I mean, you have to look at personalities, behavior issues. If you have a classroom of 28 kids and you have 7 or 8 behavior issues, it's almost like you lost the whole year.
Yeah.
So it's a tough job for administrators to look at all these issues. And, as teachers, we complain anyhow. But, it's a tough job.
Thanks, Irene.
Is it true?
I think this is great, I love data, if you couldn't tell. Last question, do we have any kind of benchmarking analysis? Do you compare, like, is there a Gloucester County, like, district-wide? Do you have any kind of access, or do we just use Iready? What do you benchmark to, or do we not benchmark to anything? And when I say benchmark, like, just comparable, like,
Are you talking about comparing to other school districts in our county?
National normative data.
Like,
national, just curious,
So-
whatever.
So
it is,
what
yeah.
Iready does, is again, I gave the numbers earlier, how often they use their benchmarking. They do that nationwide, and they create their own, they call it their national normative data. So here's all the information throughout the nation that we have for all these different grade levels, and we compare our data to that.
Okay.
It's unfortunate, I mean, we have those slides, I mean, we could show it to, I don't have them prepared now, but you could see how we do comparative to, all right, Jamie's getting it. So
oh,
we-
no, I'm not. I was gonna sign out.
Oh.
Keep talking.
So you can compare how we do to, everyone across the nation who is also involved using Iready.
Okay, so do we have a rough idea where we're at? Just curious, not that I'm gonna hold you accountable to this.
Our national us compared to the national data, we're spot on.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're, you know, either equal to or above, you know, in most areas. It would be inappropriate for me to give you, I don't have the numbers on.
Yeah, just spitballing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just
so
wanted to
we're
have an
either
idea.
on par or above.
Okay, perfect. Now that's all.
Are you sure?
Not sure.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Matt, for your presentation. Moving on, we have our first public comment portion for agenda items only. Make a motion to open to the public, that is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Anyone from the public wish to comment at this time? Seeing no one, I make a motion to close the public comment portion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? All right. School board president report. I don't have anything specifically to report this evening. Nick, do you have anything to report from NJ, SBA?
No, nothing specific. There is some training. It's virtual. It'll start next month. So I'll just give you guys a heads up at the next meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on, we have our minutes from June the 16th work session, as well as June the 21st, our regular board meeting. If everyone's had an opportunity to look those over, are there any revisions or changes?
No.
Any board members have any comments? If not, I make a motion to approve the minutes as listed. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I abstain from, the
Yeah.
21st.
Duly noted. All right, human resources?
Human resources, so, F1, we have, new employment, we do have two listed there that I just reviewed today. Highlighted, you can see just filling positions of resignations. F2 is empty, F3 empty. F4, we have a couple resignations and FMLA listed there. Just a point, the school nurse position is going to be difficult to fill. We only have a handful of applications, so we're trying to cast a wide net, but we'll struggle to fill that one.
That's for January. Replace Catherine. Is that something we're required to have somebody on site?
Requirement is one nurse per district. Now, when you have a school of 600, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, we need a nurse.
No, not, yeah, but if for a week into it, we have some coverage from other.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
F5 empty, F6 extracurricular stipend positions, there was a couple summer spots here that were just inadvertently left off around. So they're there. Nothing on the job descriptions. F8, policy, I was not at the policy committees, Michelle.
Yeah, so, Trish, myself, and Jonathan met on the 13th, and I'll first just reference the abolished policy, which is the First Families Act. Obviously, that's abolished because it's no longer in place because of the pandemic. Those that are on for first read, a lot of them were just language changes, but I'll go through them with you. 3134, which is the extra duties, basically was updated to reference the statute. Can be, the extracurricular can be considered in a teacher or staff member's evaluation. 3142 is for non-renewal of non-tenured teaching staff, and then 4146 is non-renewal of support staff. And basically, a lot of the teacher policy, 3142, was language changes. It details a lot of the process, procedures, who takes part in that process when there is a non-renewal. The support staff was updated because of a court case, and that doesn't follow the standard of the May 15th date. Usually when a teacher will be non-renewed, they have to be notified by May 15th. That's not just for support staff. mainly because a lot of times in May, we're not necessarily aware of what we need in terms of support staff, what aides we need and so forth. So for that policy, the May 15th date isn't utilized for support staff. Evaluation of teachers, teaching staff, administration, 31, 22, 21, 23, and 24. Again, a lot of this was language changes. The rubrics that are used, which is, I forget which, Danielson?
We use it.
The Danielson evaluation tool that we use has a rubric, but that has to be submitted to the county each year, but that date was extended to August 1st as opposed to June 1st. In terms of language, teacher was changed to educator. And let's see. Statutes were added for evaluation of administration, the statutes that came in there. Everything aligns with the codes that were adopted by the governor prior to the pandemic. So those codes are in the policy that were kind of on hold because of the pandemic last year. Let's see, 6471, which is school district travel. This one had a lot of language taken out. You'll see a lot of crossing out in terms of that, and that was all through from Strauss Esme. Again, it was rewritten to align with the statute. They had two items that we could have placed in that were voluntary for the board. One of them was for us to establish a maximum amount per employee for regular business travel, which we didn't feel was necessary because we only have a certain amount of staff that travel. So that's usually put in our agenda, we approve it. Trish already, and the district already has a ceiling that we have, and we don't cross that threshold anyway. The other idea, or the other language that we put in was that when it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trish, when it is submitted, both Trish and Troy need to approve the travel. Yes, we use both. We could have done one or the other. We chose to have both of them, Trish and Troy, or the superintendent is also two.
We'll approve the superintendent's travel report.
Trish?
I do.
Zoom meeting from Florida? No.
And then the last one is 8561, which is the procurement of procedure for school nutrition. And basically that's, it's a mandated policy, it's new to us. We didn't have it previously because of the New Jersey Department of Agriculture was kind of running it with the pandemic. So now we have that policy in there, which is based on NJDA. There is a chart that they utilize a lot, and that was kind of taken out because it's revised consistently. So now the chart is just referenced in the policy to the fact that it is fluid per se and tends to change. So those are the first reads. Everything else in the second reads were from last meeting. Any questions or anything I forgot, Jonathan or Trish or cover the board?
So regarding the travel policy, you said there's already a chapter in place that we have, or,
Yes.
but we're not listing that in the policy?
No.
We approve it basically with the budget every year. So we look at PD, we look at mileage, those types of registrations. And that is above and beyond contractual obligations, like for me to go to NJASBO or to go to NJSBA, those types of things. So that gets approved within the budget. So if you go back to the April meeting, you'll see that blurb in the budget, the max travel budget.
Right, that's maximum district-wide, right?
Correct.
Is there any maximum per employee?
Statute limitation is $1,500. So that was referenced in the option as well. But again, the policy committee didn't think that we needed to. I also didn't think we needed to put a strict limit on per person.
Right.
Since that per person would probably go over the actual maximum travel budget that we do set within the budget.
That's really it for HR.
Any questions? Anyone else?
I just had a question about the leaves and the resignations. Would it be possible when those are listed, for those that are resignations, if we could get what step they were on in the district when they resigned.
Is it information everybody wants?
Yeah,
That's, it's easy to pull up.
I mean, we have it on the new hires, so it would make sense we have it on the first.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I make a motion to approve human resources items F1 through F10 as recommended by the superintendent. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other questions? Comments? If not, please call the roll, please, Tricia.
Keen,
Yes.
Caselli,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
DeSilvio,
Yes.
Fregoso,
Yes.
Brand.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, education items.
Yeah, the only, long story short, so the G7, since we had that lengthy conversation, so Trish updated the master agenda just to say that it was removed, so you're really going to, really will be nothing under G7. You have to just refresh your browser for that. So really the only thing here is G4, there's some PD for our bus drivers. CPR, defensive driving, and then a speaker coming in on the 25th, which is their first in service. So that's the only item.
So what was the final resolution on the district goal?
So we're gonna go back and take a look at tiering and requirements together. To see what we can do.
So we'll discuss that in August. Any questions on the education items? If not, I make a motion to approve education items G1 through G7 as recommended by the superintendent. Actually, it'll be G6, right? We're get rid of G7.
Yeah, you can say G6.
G6. Second by Mrs.
Definitely be
Cunningham.
G7 to approve items G1 through G6.
G1 through G6. Second by Mrs. Cunningham. Any other questions or comments? Not, you call the roll, please, Rick.
Cunningham,
Yes.
Silvio,
Yes.
Fregoso,
Yes.
Keen,
Yes.
Caselli,
Yes.
Brand.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, general administration.
Yep, just normal stuff, enrollment is there, attendance as of June, drills for the month of June. Discipline table analyzed for the year, all of our balance and hib, and then we did not have any investigations.
Anyone have any questions about those items? If not, I make a motion to approve general administration items H1 through H5 as recommended by the superintendent. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Cunningham. Call the roll, please, Rick.
Caselli,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
DeSilvio,
Yes.
Fregoso,
Yes.
Keen,
Yes.
Brand.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, operational structure.
Yep. Ivan, you have your claims and payroll as normal. Anybody have any questions on the bill list? There were no added bill lists to this one, so everything that's there is no revision. Items 2, 3, and 4 are the budget transfer, board secretary report, and treasurer report for the month of May. I got no changes there. Cafeteria report is for the month of June. We did have a very good year with cafeteria. I know it was stressful for them, but they did a good job keeping everybody fed, so that was a great year for them. Item 6 is our out-of-district student tuition placements for our special education, homeless, resource home, and educational stability. Most of these are for some ESY, as well as the 21-22 year. Any questions on any of these students? Seven, 8 are none. 9 is a transportation contract for the 21-22 year. Estimated costs for the student listed. Self-explanatory, item number 10, 11, and 12, and 13 are none. And then item 14 are 3 additional contracts to approve for the 21-22 year with their contracts attached in the administrative contracts. And that's all for operations.
For the first children, do they actually have, are there people that come in and work with our kids too, or is it just staff?
No, they work with the kids.
They work
They work with the kids too, so I'm
Sorry.
assuming there's some kind of, parent sign off for that.
Yes.
And that was covered by the
You did a
grant.
great job, so answer all the questions.
I don't want to answer all
No,
the
it's fine.
questions.
I didn't want to,
No,
I was
no.
just
This is
thinking
the
you
middle
guys
of
knew
it
the
with
answer.
summer
I
school.
looked up as soon as you said it, the floor is yours, Mrs. Golden.
And that was covered by the grant.
Yes.
Item number 9.
I knew you were gonna do that.
For transportation.
I knew you were gonna support somebody for 70
I
grand.
would do it too. I mean,
Why don't we buy a
Just like
van
us.
and hire somebody to
If
do
you,
that?
if you can find somebody to hire, we will gladly do that.
I mean,
That's typically the first route that we want to go. If we have a in-house bus driver to personally drive that child or children, we do try to do that.
Jason, I'm working on getting my bus
I mean,
license.
that's, like, can you do it by September? Because-
Ted has it.
No, he does not.
Yes, he does. No, he has a
I mean,
CDL.
that's like insane.
It is.
I'll take half that, or if I could come in at 8 instead of 7, I'd do it.
Yeah, we'll adjust your schedule. We'll give you half the money, seriously.
I'd rather come in at 8 instead of 7, Jason.
Now-
And I'll bus them for free.
Like, so that's, like, there's no other, we can't get on with someone else, like, there's no.
Typically, that route is bid, so we do put it through the consortium and the transportation jointure. So.
That's one student?
Yeah.
Now, what is that school? Is that like a special needs situation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's my last one.
For the budget transfers, that's largely material, it looks like this just nets to 0, and then nets to 2,100. But these are just GL accounts. Is there any way that you could just elaborate on like the transfer, or could you put the name of the account, or where this fund is coming from, or to, or?
Well, typically, this is just a report that prints out from our software.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily get too much more detail than that.
Okay.
What number are you looking at, John?
2.
If you'd like, you can look through the chart of accounts. I know you like data and you like to do things, so the chart of accounts is very informative.
No, that might be a little too much.
These are just account transfers.
Yes, yes. Typically, you also just see the transfers from program to program or function to function.
You don't typically have these every month, do you?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
All right, any other questions for operations? If not, make a motion to approve operations committee items I-1 through I-14 as recommended by the superintendent. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Caselli. Any other comments? If not, if you call the roll, please, Rick.
Fregoso?
Yes, but abstain Billis for I-1.
Fidelity item.
Yeah.
So noted. Key?
Yes.
Caselli?
Yes.
Cunningham?
Yes, abstain from bill list 5, check number 4481.
So noted. DeSilvio?
Yes.
Brand?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Is there a way to find out, like, that bus that, like, no, I'm being serious, will they be transporting other kids? Or is
If
that-
they
is
can,
that
the
a
price
single-
usually does go down, but that's again, if somebody else jumps onto it.
So CJ's will adjust it
Correct.
if they have another participant?
And we will put that on the agenda.
Well, Jason, we'd have to pay that person to go to Yale. There's tuition.
Yeah, well, that 70,000 is only for,
Mhm.
what I'm saying is
I know,
that
I know.
if there's 2 kids in our district, it shouldn't be 7, if they're transporting multiple people, there should be a volume discount,
Can
Yeah.
we also
Can we
pay
pay
per bus?
So we have more than one kid on the bus, would it just be per bus though?
Typically, it's expensed out to the amount of kids, to the driver, to the bus. So yes, technically, we could have a full bus of Yale students that we're paying for. I don't know if that would make the cost any less, because you're still having everybody ride through Franklin Township to go to Yale. It may not be that Yale school. So that's also taken into account, is where the driver is, where the child lives, and where they're going.
All right, old business. First item is CSA evaluation process. We discussed this briefly at our last meeting. Alicia, you wanted to bring some information to the board?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that for future years, we're on the same page. I think it went fine last time, and everything was great, but I think that just in case board members leave, anyone's come, who doesn't, we all should be kind of on the same page what the process is, because the last 2 years I've been on the board was done differently, so I just think it should be more consistent. So I thought maybe we can have a discussion about what that process is, and then as a policy committee, we can create something that we can put in writing for, future, future years. If that's okay with everybody. It'll be a quick discussion. Okay?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So I liked how we did it this year, where we met together. I think we should all definitely be on our own, and we scored it on our own, right? And then we should come together and discuss it, which we did this year. Is everyone agreeing with that? That was good?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much required. Yeah.
Right, but no one really knew. It was like a weird discussion. I thought we were like, no, we did this last year, no, we did this year. You know what I mean? It was not.
You're saying as far as filling out the final report?
Yeah, I just am trying to be consistent, so as we go to the policy committee, we know what to write in the policy, like what are the procedures.
Okay.
Okay, so is that okay with everyone, that goes in the policy, that we score it independently, we come together, and we discuss it?
Yeah, I don't.
Work
I feel like
together.
that might be
Well, I don't think that
outlined
was
by
ever.
NJSBA.
Yeah,
or
that's
NJSB,
outlined
right?
by school boards.
Yeah.
That particular part I didn't think was in question. I
It's
think
not,
it was-
I thought we would put a whole policy together, we would leave that part out.
Well, maybe we could just use language that states following NJSB guidelines
Right.
for CSA, and then include anything that we feel we want that may be a little different, or in addition to what.
Well, I've never seen those guidelines, so I don't know what's in those guidelines.
Yeah, that PowerPoint that I gave you, the very first page has a link right to the whole
Right.
process, and has all the guidelines. Now, actually, I'm looking right now, I do believe we have a policy on this. So if you might want to
Which,
Yeah, so they're in the policy 1240, evaluation of superintendent. So we want to take a look at this as a policy committee.
You can do that.
1240 is the policy. I just Googled, I didn't read the whole thing, but I gave it that high. And again, this is your discussion, not
Yeah,
my
yeah.
discussion.
All right, well then, whatever that says is fine. If that matches what we're doing, if that's a good process, it's fine with me. But I guess after that, once we give all our input, I think it's important that we see the final product before it goes to the superintendent, just to make sure what we discussed is what went into the report.
I agree.
That's it.
yeah, I don't think anybody objects to that.
Well, how would we, so are you proposing, and I'm sorry to be particular about this, but it can't just be sent through email, right? Because we got sunshine problems with that. So do you propose that we would have a separate, another meeting, like another executive session to look it over after it's put together?
We could. I mean, I would assume that, I know the calendar's in the library now, and we have that, in February. Sorry, the wrong one, but you don't see it back. Actually, I don't see it in the calendar.
June, it should be May or June, it should be a pre-conference.
Yes, May.
Yeah, it's a good point, John.
So,
I mean, one suggestion, if you guys are open to it, maybe we just do the summary during the executive session.
Yeah, but I still wanna see it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
See it.
We do it at the time that we meet to review the individual answers. We do it right there on the spot, so it's done.
Oh, well, one person will be doing it, right?
Well, one person will fill it out.
Typing, right.
Right. And then it'll be completed, and then we can all see it at that time.
And sign off on it before we all leave.
It could be a Google Doc too, like they could be typing and we can see it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That would work. That's fine, with me. As long as, I don't care how we see it, as long as we see it.
Well, it would avoid having to have a second,
All right, well, and then we meet in the policy committee, we'll just.
or second or third, executive session meeting, because there are particular timing deadlines, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we have more work sessions too during that time, which at that time, I don't think we had that one extra one, we maybe could have.
Right. Well, I mean, if we did it right on the spot, it's fresh in everyone's mind, we all see it, and it's finalized at that time, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a special meeting to.
No, like essentially when we went into our executive session, we reviewed the individual comments,
Mhm.
where you and I took notes, and then we went back and filled out the summary form that goes to the superintendent. We'll just fill that form out on the spot when we're having the meeting, and then everyone will approve it on the spot, and it's done. At that point, the evaluation is complete.
That's okay with me.
Yeah, so then there's no issues. So if you guys can figure out how to put that in the policy. that'd be
Yeah,
great.
I'll figure it out.
All right. Any other comments on that?
I will, I'll sit down when I go.
All right, what's my minute? Sorry, I was trying to look for that policy. What's the number, please, whole business?
Well, this is just really the special board meeting on August 4th. I just need to make sure that we're going to have a quorum. So I had Michelle, yes, you're good. We're 5 o'clock on the 4th. Dawn had said yes. Alicia, you're a yes. Nick, you're a yes for 2 hours. So it's 5 o'clock. Is that good for you? Jonathan, are you good? August 4th at 5?
I believe honeymoon, so I don't think so, unless I could call in, but I don't know if I'd want.
No,
I'm just kidding.
no, you don't want to do
No,
that.
Upset the wife.
I'm impressed you know the date.
We'll
That's
turn
good.
that into a divorce party real quick. Lady, you said you were going away?
I'm going away.
I need Jen and Taylor. Jason, you're good for that?
Should be, yeah. There's a possibility I might go down.
All right, good. I just need to get back to Bill on that, so put it in your calendars, August 4th, 5 o'clock, we'll advertise for that. There may be some personnel positions that I want to approve that night rather than waiting until our next meeting is like the very last week before school starts, so we want to try to get that on board, especially if the title contract. Right. Okay, very good, thank you. Great.
We don't have anything listed under new business. Any board members have any new business? If not, we have our second public comment portion. Make a motion, we have the public, have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Anyone from the public like to be heard this time? On any matters? Mr. Moore?
Bill Morris, Oak Avenue, just want to compliment you on that presentation. I found it very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anyone else from the public? Seeing none, I want to make a motion, we close the second public portion, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, executive session, we do have the need for a very brief executive session to update the board on negotiations and support staff. So at this time, I make a motion, we go into executive for the purpose of discussing negotiations. That is second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Yeah, no action will be taken as a result of the executive session. You're welcome to stay if you'd like, but there's no other items on our agenda once we come out of executive.
good.
Go ahead, sir.
Make a motion, we adjourn at,
You have to come back in.
13.
we already did, you missed it.
Yeah, we did.
I wasn't here.
I know. 8:15.
16.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.